Welcome to the podcast recording of Middle East AI News Live for Thursday, May 16th, 2024, brought to you by Carrington Malin, Marketing for an AI-First World. You're listening to my discussion with Professor Merouane Debbah, Founding Director of the 6G Research Center at Khalifa University. We're talking about the upcoming 6G wireless communication standard, AI and 6G, and how the UAE has become a hub for 6G R&D. We join the conversation with Professor Merouane talking about Symantec communication and how 6G will transmit video.
So you see that if you have a model on each side, which has been created, what you need to give to a person is only the instruction on how to regenerate the information you want. And so that is a big change in what we're having, because when we're having so much massive dispersed model which are happening, this is changing drastically the realm of how you communicate. By the way, this kind of approach that we're talking about, where you send just a description, is related to a new topic in 6G called semantic communication. And I want to be very direct here, is that if you have done a bit of chat GPT, basically kind of approaches, you'll see that if you use this text to image or text to video and video to text, you don't get necessarily the same result on the other side. You won't get the same video, but you'll get the video which is basically similar in many manners in the kind of information that you want to get. So at the end, what counts is not so much that the video is the same, but the person who's behind it understands the same thing. Let me give you just an example on how we are humans doing. If I ask you now a question immediately, you'll answer me, and then you'll give me, of course, an answer, and I'm happy with that. If I ask you the same question tomorrow, Carrington, you'll give me basically the same answer, but not the same text in terms of answering. The information will be the same because you're not able to express exactly the same wording. But that's quite enough in how we communicate, because the kind of information that you'll give me will be sufficiently, I would say, accurate for me to do my task afterwards. And this is what we're dealing today, is that when models have been trained on different databases, we realize that you don't get the same result, but you're able to get the same meaning. So this is a drastic change in what we're doing. Second thing also that is happening quite drastically is that we're building a network for what we call agents or AI agents. And this is extremely important in what we're doing, in the sense that today, and there was a last announcement that was done in the last Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, which is the gathering every year of the whole telecom industry, a lot of the big companies are now looking at what we call app-free phones. What is an app-free phone? It's a phone which does not contain anymore an app store and an app. Because why do you need an app afterwards? If you want to book a car today, what you'll do is take your phone, download basically Uber, for example, then go on Uber and then start looking basically for a car and then wait and do all the process. But if you have basically any kind of AI on it, which is like an interface, you would just speak to it and say, I want a car in 5 minutes down my house. And then this is what we call an agent, which will go on a market. And you need to build that kind of infrastructure, which is fast enough for these agents to find you a car and come back. And so next generation of terminals will be app-free. They will contain just an interface on which you're going to be talking. And you need to do that kind of process at a speed which is not exactly the kind of speed on which we humans interact together. So these two features and these two examples already tell you that the kind of things that we have here is providing us new means basically to build up the right network to do that. Again, it doesn't mean that you can't build this, by the way, already on a network which is called 5G. You could, but you will not exploit the full potential of these technologies because you'll have some limitation because of the speed that is running on 5G, because of the latency which is running on the 5G. And the third example I want to give also is that something that I didn't stress enough in those KPIs is that there's also a lot of what we call censoring, basically, and sensing, basically, requirements in 6G. Meaning that the next generation of networks will have the capability to sense the environment by doing 3D reconstruction. In the sense of these waves that we're having, enable, of course, to do sensing. And sensing today is also one of the hard point to basically go in this AGI realm that everybody's claiming. What we have seen so far is that AI that has been built so far is not grounded to reality. What it means that, let's take the example of an LLM. An LLM will be able to talk to you about snow, but will never be able to feel snow. It will be able to talk about death, but it will have never experienced death. What you need to do with these models is to ground them to reality and bridge what we call the digital world and basically the virtual world, or the real world in this case. And this bridge can only be done through sensing capabilities that we provide to these terminals, to these networks, so they go. By the way, when I talk about networks terminals, I'm not talking specifically about a phone. For us, a dog is, or let's say a robot dog is a smartphone with four legs. A car is a smartphone with four wheels. A drone is a flying smartphone. And so you need, of course, to extend to all these devices that we're seeing the capability that we're bringing with the 6G technology.
There's an awful lot to it. I heard some reference to models in that description, and we talked previously about large language models. Can you tell us how large language models today are relevant to the 6G network?
So that's a very good point. And what we saw in the year 2023 happening, and especially here at the UAE, with, as you recall, the development of one of the largest large language model, top ranked open source called Falcon. And this Monday, also the announcement of Falcon 2 beating Llama 3 was a key point in terms of the evolution that we're seeing in these AI and their capability. Now, what we're seeing today, and I think you saw already some announcements done by OpenAI on the smartphone on which humans can talk, this GPT-4o that is making a lot of buzz on the internet. It shows you already the kind of gathering of information that these smartphones require and the kind of capability in terms of generating all that kind of information that we're having. Now, LLMs are very relevant to 6G because, as I told you, there are two things that we're seeing. The first thing LLMs are bringing is their capability of being super compressors in terms of information. And so the way we're transmitting basically information from one point on the other point is totally disrupted by these techniques, which are image to text, video to text, audio to text, and whatever. Second, LLMs today are highly relevant because we're now building also lightweight LLMs which can run on the phone. I think you've been seeing some announcements done by various companies on bringing basically LLMs on the phone and their capability, of course, to run locally and solve a lot of the issues we had with privacy and still continuing to work at extremely good rate. The next thing also that is very interesting with LLMs is that we've been building LLMs with what we call multimodality capability. What multimodality means, it means that these LLMs are not anymore just doing, although they're called large language, they're not just based on text only, but they're also capable of processing video, radio frequencies, audio, all the kind of basically information that a mobile phone or a network can gather. That kind of capability of processing all that kind of information into a single model and how that can enhance the capability to take decision on the network is extremely important. And one of the things, of course, that people are working now is on multi-modal LLM. By the way, within the work that is being done today between Khalifa and also TII, we are in the process of developing what we call a telecom large language model, specifically having this capability that I'm describing here. And the last one also, which is extremely important today, is this feature related to what we call AI agents at the heart, of course, of building these models. This, of course, has an impact in something called large action model. So you're not anymore just giving a result, but you're actioning it with basically a second step. I think you saw maybe at the beginning of the year at the CS Las Vegas, a company which was selling a product called Rabbit, which was an orange, basically kind of smartphone, and in which basically was the beginning of the capability to talk to a phone, and then you had this action being done. What we realized today is that you don't need to build a specific phone for that, because we're able now to run these LLMs on basically the hardware of a phone. And so these large action model where their agent capability is going to be higher in terms of providing all the features that I was talking about.
Yes. And anybody's seen that OpenAI demo during the last few days, asking OpenAI what it sees outside and interpreting what the ducks are doing in the duck pond. All of that is the sort of technology that is going to be supported by 6G, right?
It is going to be supported by 6G. Today, of course, you can do it in 5G, but again, it's not going to be the full potential. For example, if you look at Sora, Sora has been doing things where you would be able to create basically a video. But the next years will be about processing and delivering you a 3D video where basically there's going to be an hologram, which is going to be on the other side speaking to you. And that kind of capability requires a lot of data rate that has to be poured with localization capability. And that's the kind of network that you need to build around that. I want also to stress for if some of the people listening to us come from the operator industry, I think 6G is also providing a great opportunity to change and disrupt what the telecom operators were. For many years, you have to know that the operator industry was stuck between what we call over-the-top layers like Netflix and others, and users which were downloading, and they were seen as dumb pipes. And of course, the kind of revenue generation that they could do was quite limited in the sense, of course, that they were delivering through a fixed price, basically unlimited packages in terms of how you download. And so the kind of industry, the telecom operator industry, was a bit stuck in how they could generate revenue, basically, by going then into diverse, I would say, kind of means, becoming banks, becoming services, but it never worked. I think here they have a great opportunity to come back into the play, because here what they're doing is also doing an offering of becoming the platform on which will run all these GPTs that we're talking about in a distributed manner. I'd also believe that the future will be very cloudified. I'm not saying that it's the end of the cloud, but I think at the moment that you start having more and more things distributed massively on the edge around the world, then you need basically a seamless mobile network which connects that in an efficient manner without you being aware that, of course, things are distributed and far away, but instead of being centralized. And I think here there's an opportunity to build that network, and also with great ideas on how you can generate revenues related to marketplace that can be built on that.
Now, whether you like it or not, whether you wanted to or not, you've been hearing about 6G in the UAE for the last 8 or 10 months. And it's easy to tell that this has been raised in priority, that it has government support, that it's critical to the operators, the telecommunications operators in the UAE. Where does this huge commitment come from, and why is this drive in the UAE to embrace 6G and play a role in shaping the standards?
So that's a very good point. I think, first of all, we need to admit that UAE has been always been a tech early adopter of technology. And even for the previous generations, which were not built here, and here we have a great opportunity with 6G to build it here, we've been early adopter of this technology. When you look at 5G, Etisalat and other operators were within the first adopters of this technology. And I think the fact that the country here is with people who like technology, who basically like to use technology, like also to exploit that technology for their businesses, is a very good, I would say, playground for us. I think before things were more Japan oriented. We saw it with 2G, 3G. And now we're seeing a lot of things happening in the Middle East because we have a generation which I would say tech native. And I think that's a very good point. Second, in terms of making the environment tech friendly, I think UAE has been also very precursor in a couple of key technologies. I think with AI, I don't need to spend my time mentioning the fact that we had the first minister of AI in 2017 here, but also in things like blockchain and other type of technology. We've been precursor basically in providing the kind of environment regulation that could provide those technologies to, let's say, grow. And what we've been seeing since last year is, of course, and especially since 2022, it kind of will basically to also play a big role in having a share in basically the development of 6G and having our voice heard in the big consortium and I would say standardization committees. There's been an effort which has been done through a number of centers which have been dedicated their effort to 6G. TII, the Technology Innovation Institute, started its 6G activity in 2021, which is, I think, also a sign of our early adoption of willing to engage into building teams which were working on 6G. Then a couple of key conferences took place within a 6G AI summit now, which gather more than 200 people per year. We'll talk about it. There's going to be a third edition happening in November. Each November, this conference is becoming a kind of standard within the region. And the third thing that happened is, of course, the 6G Center, which was established at Khalifa University, with the will, of course, to launch a lot of activities and recruitments of top researchers here in the UAE to kickstart our presence in terms of 6G standardization and play a role with a delegation going over there. Now, TDRA has been at the heart of that, and I'd like, of course, to thank a lot of my TDRA colleagues in terms of course, hosting already last year the World Radio Congress, Congress taking place in Dubai, and making sure that basically we could play a big role in issuing and providing the kind of vision that we have here. And this year, of course, on top of the establishment of the 6G Center, was the will to go on in establishing basically today a 6G committee that was announced. The full announcement will be done in the next weeks in terms of who are the exact members. But that 6G committee will have basically a big role, and it's going to be Khalifa, which will be leading it, in terms of developing the key roadmap with the different milestones that we have to the development of 6G. Our target, of course, is to kickstart some pilot programs here in the region, and especially in the UAE related to 6G, to have also a share in terms of patents that reflects our presence, and also to have a voice within, I would say, the world, I would say, geopolitics in terms of 6G, in the sense of having between, I would say, the US, Europe, China, which are leading, have also a voice in our presence in terms of the kind of use cases that are tailored to our interests, to have also a voice in terms of basically the problematics that we're having. Things like coverage are still problems that the big, I would say, technologies have not been able to cope with. Sustainability are ones which are extremely important. Security, privacy are also the other points that are need to be mentioned. But I think this commitment goes in a series of basically initiative that the UAE government has been taking, and I'm quite happy that basically I've been here to see this evolution happening in the last, I would say, 3 years.
Yes, worthy point on the government support. There's certainly a big commitment to keep ensuring that the UAE stays ahead of the curve in terms of technology and telecommunications. Professor Merouane, let's talk about university's 6G Center in a bit more detail. This was established last year, am I right?
Yeah, it was established last September. It kickstarted. I'm the director of that center. I have a vice director, or what we call a deputy director, called Sami Muhidat, who's also professor and supporting me within basically the development of the 6G Center. Today, it has roughly around 10 professors which are involved in the research at the moment, with, of course, PhDs, postdocs, and also researchers. We have also an involvement of industrial partners as of today, which are supporting that center. These are the key players within the UAE. We have, of course, TII, who's supporting us in terms of a chair that was established, and we have today a professor called Sanson Lassols, who's heading basically that chair with a group of research. We have also WWT, which is a big leading company in the technology realm, which is also supporting us. We have also today Open Innovation AI, which is also a company here in the UAE, which just started a couple of less than a year ago, which is also supporting us with our research. And we're in a strong discussion with the classical stakeholders that I think you know, Huawei, Ericsson, and Nokia, to continue basically the support that is important for us. That center, of course, has different missions. The first mission, of course, is to play a big role in the 6G roadmap of the UAE in supporting the government to continue basically in establishing a clear roadmap with milestone and have, as I told you, this presence, which is extremely important for us at the ITU level, at the 3GPP level, and also at the HC level, which are classical organization standardization committees. We have also a big role that we're playing today on the educational front, and my colleagues who are taking a big chunk of that effort, and I'd like to at least acknowledge their effort in terms of building adequate curriculum, which are basically 6G rooted with a lot of work also on AI and LLMs and machine learning for telecom, which is being built by that. I never mentioned that, but historically, for people who are not knowledgeable about Khalifa University started basically as a telecom entity. You have to know that it was called in 1987 the Etisalat College. And so it's not so surprising that the university today is taking back basically the role it had a couple of years ago in terms of leading the way around technology. Of course, from Etisalat College, I won't spend all my time, but of course, the university went from merger to merger with something called the Petroleum Institute. From the Petroleum Institute, we became the Khalifa University. And today, it's one of the highlights of the UAE. I think a ranking came up yesterday where today, in terms of research, we are ranked number one in the UAE. And within the Times, we are also in the top 40 in the world. So that showcases also that we are getting today the kind of environment with my colleagues, which is quite important. It's a technology-intensive, research-intensive university, and we also benefit from other centers. We have a cyber-physical research center headed by a professor called Ernesto Damiani, so we're benefiting a lot from their kind of platform. We have also basically another center called EP10, which is also a center which is totally tailored to the telecommunication industry. It's been there many years before with British Telecom, and I think this is also quite important for us. And we have also other, I would say, colleagues which work on the math department, on the physics department, on the computer science department, which are supporting us. And the support of the university, led by basically our president, Sir John Rayleigh, is also basically providing us all the realm to be connected within the 6G realm.
Could you give us briefly, because we're running out of time, some insight into what the research the university is doing in the 6G arena?
So that's a very good point. Today, our center is split, I would say, in three pillars. We have one pillar which is related to one of the key features of 6G, which is called the broadband connectivity. On the broadband connectivity front, we have a lot of activity done on our side, and especially also in collaboration with TII in the realm of what we call large intelligent surfaces, which is some kind of new technology which has been built, which enables you basically to provide you high data rate to what we call reflection surfaces. It's a beyond massive MIMO kind of key technology. There was already a demo done by my colleagues of TII at the last GITEX, showcasing, of course, the performance at different bands. And that's the kind of work that we're continuing to do, which is related to what we call beyond massive MIMO communication. We have also some work on the connectivity and broadband front related to what we call multiple access and NOMA, non-orthogonal multiple access. And we have an outstanding professor called Professor Zigo, who's one of the most cited professor I know so far in the realm of multiple access, which is how you connect so many massive devices simultaneously. We have also some work which is being done on the visible light front and visible light communication. So that's one pillar related to how we ensure the broadband connectivity and the massive connectivity. We have another pillar basically led as of today by Professor today Arafat, which is on the sensing and basically localization. Localization is a key feature for the future, where we're using all the different, I would say, means, especially RF, to be able to have the super precise localization. And there, a lot of work is being done today on this 3D imaging aspect. And then we have a third pillar where I think that is giving us some kind of disruptive point on what we call native AI. And on the native AI, of course, we're working a lot on distributed GPT, semantic communication, semantic codes, which are at the heart of how you build those networks. You have to know that the team had, in the last conference in ICAST, which was a couple of months ago, got an award during a competition done by MIT. And that was some joint work done between Khalifa and TII. And the first top-ranked team which got that award in terms of native AI for basically wireless communication came up with basically the joint team of TII and Khalifa, which showcases the strength that we have today in positioning ourselves as one of the centers in the world with the capability of mixing large language model, AI, / basically wireless communication.
Let's just switch in the remaining minutes to the calendar, because it seems like there's 6G events of some kind in Abu Dhabi all the time, workshops and meetings. There's also a couple of big conferences coming up. There's the Abu Dhabi 6G Summit in November, and there's also the inaugural IEEE conference on communications and networking, I think a few days later in November. Could you tell us about those?
Yeah, so I was mentioning at the beginning, we were one of the first establishing a annual event called the 6G Abu Dhabi Summit. It's becoming now, I think, quite important event in gathering all the community here beyond the Middle East, because we're getting, of course, all the top professors which are coming here. And we started quite early in the sense that we started 2022. So it's going to be taking place, in November this year. And I think this event basically is at the same time an academic and industrial event, where we welcome basically CTOs of companies like Huawei. We're having Tongwen, who's going to be a speaker. We're getting top guys from academia, but also people coming from, I would say, industrial standardization organization. At the same time, we were granted by the IEEE basically to kickstart the organization of the first basically Middle East conference on communication networking. And this is led today by Khalifa. It's called IEEE MACOM 2024, also taking place on the 17th to the 20th of November. So just a couple of days in between the 6G Abu Dhabi Summit. That conference, of course, gathered all the biggest players around the Middle East and North Africa on this topic. And I think this is the first edition, by the way. We're quite happy that IEEE decided to localize it here in Abu Dhabi. And it's a conference which will be running in the GCC region and within our partners in the next year. So that also is a big event that we're organizing. We're also basically, of course, having some other events which are happening here related to more large language models and AI, because we think that this combination is very important. There's going to be an AI open source summit, which is also going to be taking place for information in November, a couple of weeks in between. And that also is going to be gathering a lot of key players in terms of understanding how these large language models can run on small devices, how they're done, and go on. And we have in December also a conference here called ICDM, which is more data-oriented, in December, taking place also in Abu Dhabi, and gathering all the community related to data.
Wow, you're shaping up to be a very busy end of year for you.
Yes, it's going to be a very busy end of year. We're quite happy that all these events are taking now, because I think this is exactly the kickstart that we need to push. We need to create a bit of momentum. As I told you, the time is short when I gave you the planning of how things are going. So a lot of the things have to happen in the next months in terms of gathering the community, building the right consortiums, building basically the right links between different places which are key players in 6G. And again, technology is not a single entity which can build it. This is why these conferences are taking place. We are, of course, partnering with the best, going from Singapore, going from Finland in Oulu. We have today intense discussion, bringing some of the top researchers from Finland to come work at Khalifa and be part of the 6G Center, because we strongly believe in strong partnerships and strong collaborations, basically, so that we can move forward. And these kind of projects require basically these kind of worldwide partnerships.
And can you tell us when the 6G committee for the UAE will be officially formed?
Yeah, by June, you'll get a release. There was an announcement by my colleagues of TDRA already that basically this has been set up. You'll be having basically the full list basically around the committee by June. And then there's going to be a work that's going to be kickstarting within this committee to kickstart basically in issuing a white paper, which will be released within that time frame, and then digging more into the roadmap with exactly some quantifiable results. When I mean quantifiable, meaning we want to look not just at a technology-oriented type of work, but we want also that the 6G committee looks at the impacts, the economical impacts that this can have within the region, and especially in the UAE. We want to look basically at how basically we can create startups which can have a big role to play at the technology level here in the UAE. We want to look also basically how we have use cases which are specific to the region that we can, of course, also highlight to all the big players on how it's important also to look at our use cases, which have not been so much research on. And that kind of work is very important for us because we're trying to build with SIGG also this knowledge economy and the different step for this knowledge economy here.
Great. Thank you very much. Any parting comments before we close off?
Yes, maybe one last comment. I think something quite important that we saw in the last years, and especially this goes for the students, for those who are listening to me. I think in the year 2000, the best students I saw in the world were all going into telecom, all the engineers, all the people, because that was the telecom hype. It was a digital wave, it was the internet wave. And then for some reason, these last 10 years, we saw a shift in all the different, I would say, courses that students were following, master students, towards AI. And AI had basically kind of taken all the energy of our discipline. Today, what we're realizing is the need of having more and more of those students formed in the key technologies which are new, and for which basically we are now pushing to get those students, those PhD students, to come in our program. Because again, building a technology, whatever ideas you can have, holds back if you don't have the right people to do it. And we're spending a bit of time here in Khalifa to start attracting and bringing back basically the telecom sector, the networking sector, the communication sector at large, to get those students back to solve some of the interesting problems that we have. And what we're seeing today is that there's a big opportunity for them to make a difference, because with 6G, we're telling them that they have the ability to work on two basically domains at the same time, the communication one and the AI one. We're bridging the gap today because we're building the network for that. And I hope we'll be getting more and more of these top students coming to our domains to make a difference related to that, because again, this kind of technology is now solving a lot of problems which are beyond the telecom sector.
Excellent point. Professor Merouane, thank you so much for joining us on Thursday Deep Dive. Hope to bring you back maybe later in the year when we know more about what's going on at those two conferences.
Yeah, really pleased to do an update with you, and especially for the 6G Summit that we're doing and the MidCom conference. Maybe we can do an update at that time and explain a bit the roadmap that we have been building with my colleagues. And I think that would be a very good point in terms of...
You've been listening to a recording of Middle East AI News Live for Thursday, May 16th, 2024, brought to you by Carrington Malin. Thanks for listening.